Hey everybody, it's been a minute. Corona, Rob here. How's it going, everybody? Why am I wearing sunglasses? I don't know. I just felt like doing that for some reason. How's it going, guys? I haven't done a kind of book video, really much of any videos, in quite a while, as I had announced on the channel. But anyway, I'm back with some books, stack of books right here. I know that's what so many of you subscribed for, was the book content, you know. If you subscribe for the for the gaming content, I apologize. Actually, what am I apologizing for? It's my fudging channel. So there you go. Rachel's got me saying fudging. See? I can't even say fuck anymore. Anyway, I don't know what's wrong with me today. So, once again, if some of you guys remember from last year, I read a ton of books last year. I got really into reading. Well, back into reading, I should say. I did not read 50 books this year. I fell short of that. I think it was because I listened to a lot less audiobooks this year and because I am now a dad. So I did read less. That being said, I read a little over 30 books, so that's not bad. And I decided to make a top 10 list because why not? I mean, I'm reading so many books, might as well talk about them, right? There's a ton of stuff I read. It's mostly science fiction. And as always, you know, there's some heavy hitters here, I would say. I would also say that, I should stipulate really, that these really aren't books that came out this year. There's one book that came out this year that's actually not science fiction. It's actually the only nonfiction book on this list, so woo. But yeah, so most of these are actually quite old books, but that's okay. That's what I'm into, and I don't know, I just thought it'd be really fun to just talk about the books that I read and yeah, go from there. So with that being said, enough of this rambly crap. Let's get into the books that I read, the top 10 books that I read this year. Now, before we get into that, there's a couple little honorable mentions and a few things that I wanted to also talk about, a few other books, before we get into the main top 10. First thing, and I'll make this quick, I decided to pick 3 honorable mentions because there was tons of stuff that I rated on Goodreads, like 5 stars, 4 stars. So I thought I would just name very quickly the sort of my top 3 honorable mentions. So the first one is The Positronic Man by Isaac Asimov and Robert Silverberg. I loved this book. It's the story about a robot named Andy who quests to be a human, and it's a great book. This was really awesome. I talked about this in, I think, the last 10 books I read this year video or whatever I did. This was great. Rachel and I both read this, actually. I think I got this for her for Christmas last year, or birthday, I want to say. But anyway, we both read this year, and we also watched The Bicentennial Man, starring Robin Williams, which was awesome as well. So I really liked this. This just fell short of my top 10. This was a really fantastic book, so I recommend this if you want a good Asimov/Silverberg novel. I also read the novelization. This was just, I think about a month ago I read this. Novelization, one of my favorite classic science fiction movies, Forbidden Planet. Look at that cover, huh? That is just gorgeous. So, yeah, this is the novelization, pretty much to a T, the story of Forbidden Planet. But, you know, you get some of the characters' inner thoughts, and there's, you know, it gives it a little bit of a different feel than the movie, obviously, but still a great story. One of my absolute, if honestly, might be my favorite science fiction film of all time, especially from that era, the 50s. And really well written, I would say. And I blasted through this and had a great time. So, yeah. Forbidden Planet. If you can find this, I managed to somehow find this at a big book sale this year. Read it. It's quite good, especially if you like the film. And my last honorable mention, also, noticing a theme here, another science fiction classic, which has also been made into several films, I Am Legend here by Richard Matheson. The book is different. I think the only version of this film where the sort of evil, I don't know if you want to say, well, the evil or the, I don't know, the plague that ends up wiping out humanity. The only version of this book that became a film that's a little more true to the actual story is the original starring Vincent Price I think it's called The Last Man on Earth. And the people who succumb to this illness that pretty much wipes out the population. Instead of becoming zombies, become vampires. So this is really cool. This was a great book, super fast read, cool atmosphere. Just loved this book. It was awesome. Check out I Am Legend if you haven't read it. I'm sure some of you guys have seen the Omega Man or the movie starring Will Smith or the Vincent Price movie. There's a bunch of them. Check it out. The book's probably the best version. The next thing I want to mention is that I had 2 books that were rereads this year, which had I not already read them in the past, they would most certainly be in the top 10. The first is Sphere by Michael Crichton, which I only read 2 Crichton books, which I read a ton of his stuff last year. My goal is to read all of his books, but one of my favorite channels, book channels anyway, Mike's Book Reviews, has been doing all of the Crichton books, and they read Sphere, so I was like, oh, I'm going to take the opportunity. I loved this book. It's probably my favorite Crichton book aside from maybe Jurassic Park, and I reread it and I loved it just as much as the first time I read it. So this is awesome, cool sci-fi sort of first contact novel with a kind of psychological twist. Great book, Sphere, Michael Crichton. Read Sphere. It's excellent. The other reread I did this year was a book that I haven't read in over a decade now, and it's YA, but it's still a classic, and I think it's a classic for a reason. The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. This held up great. I didn't plan to read either of the sequels because I recall the second book being relatively similar to the first book. It was still good, but not quite as original. And the third book being kind of hit or miss. But I was like, you know what? I'm just going to reread The Hunger Games because I've been meaning to do that for a while. And it was just as good as I remember it being. In fact, I might have actually appreciated it a bit more this go-around, given all the future dystopias that I've read since The Hunger Games. So, excellent book. I highly recommend to anybody who hasn't read it. You know, people, it's not one of these, like, teen, Twilight-esque books that are just kind of blah. This is actually really, really good and really smart. It's not the most original story. I know stuff like Battle Royale did it before Suzanne Collins did it, but she definitely has her own take on it and her own unique style, and I really liked it. So check out The Hunger Games. And the last thing I wanted to talk about before I get to the actual top 10, I'm trying to be quick here so I can actually get through my top 10, is my biggest disappointment of the year. Now, the book that I was probably the most disappointed by was a book that was part of a read-along by my absolute favorite booktube channel, Media Death Cult, and I've talked about them I talked about him, I suppose, Moid, who runs Media Death Cult, quite a few times, actually, on other book videos. But anyway, he did a read-along of a sort of big space opera book that I've heard nothing but good things about, but I didn't really jive with, and that was A Fire Upon the Deep, not the Teep, by Werner Vinge. I think it's his prose. There's a lot of cool ideas in this, like the Tines, one of the most interesting ideas for an alien species that I've ever read in a book, so I'll give it that. The world building was pretty good, but I just thought his prose was awful. I found his prose very clunky. The story itself was okay. I think from like the big space opera sort of subgenre of science fiction, I haven't read a ton of it, but I will say at least Alastair Reynolds does it way better than him. I got to read some Ian M. Banks and Peter F. Hamilton and guys like that, so I'm not super well versed in space opera. And like I said, cool ideas, cool concept, but the prose, meh. I'm not really a fan of his writing, so sorry to you guys who were really big fans of this book, but it just didn't jive with me, so that's my thoughts on that. Okay, now that I got through the honorable mentions and all that crap, let's get to my top 10 books. So, coming in at number 10, a big book for this year, I would say, especially since there was a huge film that came out, and I'm of course talking about Dune. Now, this is the only book that I actually rated 4 stars that's on this list. The rest I rated 5 stars on Goodreads, so to me they were essentially perfect books that came after this. This is not a perfect book. In fact, the 3 honorable mentions that I just talked about, Forbidden Planet, Positronic Man, I Am Legend, I actually rated 5 stars. So I rated this lower. So why did Dune make it? Well, number one, it's Dune. Okay, I had to have Dune in my top 10. Again, as I said with Vernor Vinge, but not nearly to the same degree. I'm not the biggest fan of Frank Herbert's prose, but I think honestly, having watched the original David Lynch film, which I kind of enjoyed, and also watching the excellent Dune 2021 movie that I really, really liked, one of the best movies I've seen in a long time. I think it really gave this book, I think it really did this book justice and really highlighted how good this story is. And this book has stayed with me more than other books this year. So for that alone, I think I had to include it. And I did overall have a good time. It just took me forever to read this book, probably longer than any other book on this list. It took me 2 months. And again, I think it's just how kind of dense it is, and I recall being quite busy while reading this book, so there's that kind of factor as well. But that being said, excellent. Dune is a classic for a reason. I recommend everybody at least read this at least once, and it piqued my interest enough between this and the film that I do plan on reading some of the other novels in the series. I want to read up to God Emperor of Dune, so that's 3 more books. So I am going to do that at some point, probably next year. But yeah, this was good. I liked it a lot. It's got a few issues in my opinion, but I still think it's really, really good. So number 10 is Dune. Okay, get ready for some more sci-fi classics here. My number 9 is another classic, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. This was a really fun, like, very easy, fast read for me. It was funny, it was smart, I liked the characters, I liked the world. It's got that kind of quirky English humor that I kind of enjoy. And I just had an overall great time with this. It's another one, again, a classic for a reason. I really, really liked this. It was also, I think I read this after a pretty dense, I think I read it after House of Suns, which was a pretty dense book, and between some Dark Tower books there. So this was a nice little quick palate cleanser for me. I really enjoyed it. So I plan on reading more of this series as well. I know there's like four or 5 sequels, something like that, to this, but they're all pretty fast, easy reads from what I understand. So I'm definitely going to be reading more of this series as well. But the first book, at least, was excellent. So had to give a shout out to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Okay, number 8 is not technically the only fantasy novel on this list, but probably the most fantasy, epic fantasy. And I don't know, I might ruffle a few feathers with this one, because for some reason the fantasy community, well, I know why they have an issue with this guy, but I don't know, I don't really care about that. I thought the book was great. Wizard's First Rule, the very first book in the Sword of Truth series. I did this on audiobook in the spring, and I gotta tell you, I loved this. I thought it was fantastic. Great world building, awesome characters, epic story, had that very classic fantasy feel to it. People seem to have an issue with this book. They, like a lot of Wheel of Time fans, me being a huge Wheel of Time fan, say that he ripped off Robert Jordan. I gotta say something. Robert Jordan more than ripped off Dune with a lot of the stuff that is in this book, in my opinion. So I don't think it's ripping off. I think people don't like Terry Goodkind as a person, which is fair. He often rips on the fantasy genre. People don't really like that he's like super influenced by Ayn Rand. I don't really care about that. I just care about his actual writing. And this book I thought was really fun. It goes in a lot of different places. I really love the characters of Richard and Kaelin and Zed. And it's just an epic story, and I really just had a blast doing it. I think it also helped that I listened to this on audiobook, and the guy they got to narrate this did an excellent job. So in terms of, if you want a nice classic epic fantasy, you really can't get, well, you can get better, I think, than Wizard's First Rule, but this is right up your alley, I think. I really, really enjoyed this. So had to give some love to Mr. Goodkind here. Okay, I don't know if this is a cheat, but my next book here is sort of a collection of books, a collection of short stories, I guess. And it's the commemorative edition of the Necronomicon, which is a bunch of H.P. Lovecraft's short stories, particularly in his Cthulhu mythos, which is kind of like his, I guess, world where he talks about a lot of the same lore with Cthulhu and stuff. Now, I gotta say, it's a little bit of a cheat because I did not read everything out of this. I probably read, I think, 5 or 6 stories between reading stuff from this and listening to some audiobooks. There's a great YouTube channel, by the way, called Horror Babble. Shout out to them, where they narrate a lot of Lovecraft stories, and I really enjoyed listening to that at work and kind of absorbing some of these stories. And I've read a bunch of them. My very favorite is The Color Out of Space so far, but I really liked The Lurking Fear, Dagon, Call of Cthulhu, which is of course classic. What is it called? I think it's called the Dunwich Horror. Yeah, that one was really good too, and a few others. Lovecraft's great, really creepy, dark imagery, really cool ideas, and definitely a troubled man from what I understand, with a troubled mind, and it comes across really well in his writing. So I thought it was great. Really got me into horror. At least this year, I read this around Halloween, a bunch of his short stories, and I really enjoyed it. So had to give love to Mr. Lovecraft. And yeah, please check out H.P. Lovecraft. He is considered kind of the godfather of modern horror for a reason, and has written some amazing stuff, so definitely check him out if you haven't. And we're getting through them fast. My next book is the only book that actually came out this year, and is definitely a departure from the rest of the stuff that I read this year: horror, sci-fi, fantasy, especially sci-fi, which I mostly read this year. This is a non-fiction book. It's a biography by a musician, and not even probably, my absolute favorite musician, or well, favorite singer of all time. And it's Rainbow in the Dark, the Ronnie James Dio autobiography. Rachel got me this for my birthday. I really wanted it. I haven't read a autobiography like this in years by a musician. I used to love them. I've read like the real Frank Zappa book. I read a little bit of Ace Frehley's autobiography, a couple other things like that. But I had to read this. This was penned by Ronnie James Dio himself. A few years he was working on it before he died. There's a few little notes by Wendy Dio as well, but I'll make this quick just in case people don't really care. But he was the singer of 3 prolific bands: Rainbow, Black Sabbath, and his solo band Dio. He talks about everything from growing up in upstate New York, which is funny enough where I live now. He actually is from this area. So he mentions a lot of cities and towns in this area, which kind of really painted a very vivid picture of what his childhood was like, and him, up and coming, working in these bands, playing these venues in these little tiny towns around here that I've many times driven through and been to. So that was really neat, but it was cool to see his journey from just a small town Italian upstate New York kid to playing in 3 of the biggest and most important heavy metal bands in history and becoming really a rock legend. So this was really, really fun. Oh, and I got my little Paper Mario bookmark still in this thing. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. This was really fun. Made me love the man all over again. And one of my total heroes here, Ronnie James Dio. If you're into rock and metal, you got to check this out. It's required reading. Getting into the top 5. The rest is all pretty much science fiction. So let's get to it. My number 5 was a really, really fun book that I read. I think I talked about this in a previous video, but I read it in the spring. It was written in the 40s, super smart for its time. Post-apocalyptic novel written by George R.R. Stewart called Earth Abides. Excellent, excellent book. This one was just super smart, just really had a cool vibe to it. Musty book smell, had that smell to it too, gave me that kind of cool, like classic science fiction feel to it. And just some of the ideas, the way Stewart describes what happens to the Earth after humanity is pretty much wiped out from, again, a very serious disease. Weird idea. Could this happen? I don't know. But anyway, it's really cool. It's cool to see his ideas about where humanity can actually go after civilization is long gone. And just great feel. One of the best post-apocalyptic books I've read. Check out Earth Abides. It's really, really just a kind of, I want to say, not underground classic, but, not as well known as the really, really popular sci-fi from this period, so I loved it. Number 4 is a sequel to one of my favorite books that I read this year, possibly my favorite book in science fiction. It is Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card, the sequel to Ender's Game. If you're looking for, a similar story to Ender's Game, look elsewhere, because that is not what this is. Ender's role in it is interesting. It's kind of like a messiah role almost. And from what I understand, this was written before Ender's Game, and it was something. I'm gonna butcher the story here, so I apologize if I get some of this wrong. But from what I understand, Orson Scott Card wrote this and couldn't get it published, so he wrote Ender's Game, got that published, became a hit, sort of kind of wedged Ender into the story, and you have Speaker for the Dead. I think this was excellent. I think it was maybe like a tiny, like half step below Ender's Game, but it was on the same level. I really, really liked this book. Rachel recommended it to me because she had read it before I did. She's kind of ahead of me on the Ender's Game, or on the Ender series, so she just recently actually read the third book, Xenocide. But this was really cool, a lot of cool ideas in this. I like the piggies, which are the sort of alien race that Card comes up with in this. They talk about the Bugger War. They talk about sort of Ender's journey from when he defeated the Buggers to where he kind of ends up now in this book. And I don't know, it's hard to describe if you haven't read Ender's Game, but if you have read Ender's Game, check this out. It's a worthy sequel, but it's a lot different, so don't expect the same thing. Number 3, we're in the top 3. Awesome. So number 3 was a book that I actually just read a couple weeks ago, and it blew me away. I thought this was excellent. It is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Another post-apocalyptic one about the end of the world. Fairly simple story about a father and a son who are survivors of whatever this apocalyptic event was that pretty much wiped out humanity and kind of left the world in ruins. Them just walking down a road, trying to find, I guess it's not really explicitly stated, just something, trying to find a better way to live, and just the stuff they encounter on the way. And it's very dark, it's very depressing, it's very heartwarming at times, but some of the stuff that happens between the father and the son. And yeah, this book it was a page turner for me. It was a super, super easy read. And I really, really loved it. It was very dark and depressing, though. So if you don't like that kind of thing, The Road might not be quite what you're looking for. But if you want a very easy read, a very thought-provoking, a very emotional, and just a very vivid, a very vivid story, I would check this out. It was very good. So yeah, The Road, definitely top 3, possibly top. I would say top 10 material for me in terms of science fiction as a whole, so definitely check this out. Excellent, excellent book. So my number 2, I've talked about this book a bit. This one blew me away too. This was like sort of I guess they term it in gaming, a sleeper hit for me. This was another one that was sort of, that I've known about for a little while, and I finally decided to read this year. And it's one of the weirdest books I ever read, but also one of the best books that I've ever read. Definitely, probably maybe even top 5 material for me overall in science fiction, in terms of just of all time for me. And that's To Your Scattered Bodies Go by Philip Jose Farmer, which is the first book in the Riverworld. I almost said Ringworld. That's Larry Niven. In the Riverworld series, and I'm gonna sum it up with this premise: when you die, you wake up naked in this river world, and little mushrooms pop up and give you food and psychedelic drugs, and pretty much everybody that's ever existed that's died is reborn sort of in this river world. And it follows a guy named Richard Burton, who is a real life historical figure that lived in the late 1800s, and just his journey trying to figure out what's the deal with this, why is the afterlife like this, and all that. You may be asking where the science fiction component comes in. I don't want to spoil it because it's really great. But anyway, I highly, highly suggest, if you want a really very strange read, kind of acid trip sort of dream. I don't know what Philip Jose Farmer was smoking or ingesting when he wrote this, but it was excellent. To Your Scattered Bodies Go, one of my, probably the best, really the best sort of standalone book that I read this year. Is that a hint? Okay, now, what's number one? What could have possibly topped the books that I already talked about? Well, I'm going to cheat here, and I'm going to mention a entire series. Some of you who know where I've been going with my reading, or some of you who know what I've been reading this year, I think I mentioned it earlier in the video, will know where I'm going with this. Anyway, it is the Dark Tower series, at least the first 5 books of the Dark Tower series. I'm actually, right now, this is the current book that I'm reading, the 5th book, The Wolves of Calla, which I've just barely started, to be honest, but I just put it on here because, I mean, probably I'll finish it by the end of the year. It's right now, like, early/mid-December as the recording this. So yeah, The Dark Tower. At the very least, the first 4 books have been excellent. I did technically read The Gunslinger. It was the last book I read last year, so we kind of came full circle this year. I've been working on the whole series this year, and now that it's December again, I'm working on the 5th book. So I've been kind of reading these books in between other books and other series and such this year. So The Dark Tower, I mean, it is really Stephen King's sort of magnum opus. I haven't really read, to be honest, much of his other stuff, and it's apparently the big epic series that all of his worlds sort of converge upon, and there's references to other books, from what I understand, characters from other books, which is going over my head, but I do plan on reading a lot more of his books in the future, so it'll be interesting to see like what characters that were major parts of the Dark Tower are parts of these other books, you know, so I'm actually kind of looking forward to that. Yeah, so the story of Roland, the gunslinger, and his quartet, it's science fiction, it's fantasy, it's western, it's horror, it's future dystopia, sort of post-apocalyptic stuff. It really merges many, many genres together and really comes together in a very, very unique story. I have to say I've been really loving the series so far. The first 4 books were excellent. The 5th one I've heard is good too. I've heard the ending is very, very polarizing, so I'm kind of looking forward to that. My plan is to kind of wrap up the series next, or this next year. Hopefully by the end of the year I'll be done the 5th book, and then I'll just have 2 more books to go. And I think there's also another novel that takes place between like the 4th and 5th, or the 3rd and 5th, or something like that, which I'll probably also read at some point. But yeah, that's my kind of epic fantasy series that I'm working on right now. And yeah, I've been having a blast. I love the characters, I love the world. I think it's been just really, really, it's got such a cool like vibe. He goes so many different places with it. I love the character of Roland and Eddie and Susanna and Jake. They're all very interesting, and yeah, great imagery, great journey. It's I love my thick fantasy series, so it's really hitting that sweet spot for me. So yeah, number 1, Stephen King's The Dark Tower series. So that's it, everybody. That's my top 10 plus a little extra for you guys, but my top 10 books that I've been reading this year. I've been having a blast. Reading has really become quite an obsession for me. For those of you who subscribe to my stuff for the gaming content, sorry. I would love to do a top 10 gaming or games from this year, but I gotta be honest, I've been so busy. I really haven't played 10 games, at least games from this year, I don't think. So maybe I'll do like a top 10 games that I played this year. I don't know. But anyway, I digress with that. That being said, I loved this. I'm hoping I can read more books next year. I'd like to hit that 50 goal again. And I'm curious to see where my, I guess, literary journey takes me in the future. So thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it. If you haven't, give me a like and subscribe. And yeah, I got nothing else. Bye, everybody. Peace.